We got the thing. Not yet. Not yet. Are we there yet?
Yep,
Are we
Well,
there?
we're there yet. We're live.
yeah.
Live? Where does it say live? I don't see live.
It gave
Anyway,
me the warning.
it gave you the warning. Okay. Hello and Happy New Year to everybody. Welcome to this week's edition of the Weekly Roundup. Sorry I missed you all last week. I was actually in my car. I probably could have joined from my car, but um, traveling down Nashville, Tennessee for a hot yoga weekend with one of my BFFs who's going to do a teacher training down there. And I took 4 hot yoga classes in less than 48 hours and was like, holy shit, how did I used to do this all the time? It's like it took me 2 days to recover. And it was actually really kind of fun because it all kind of comes out, it's like it's hard not to be a teacher, right? And so it came out that I was a Bikram teacher, and the woman that was teaching class went to training in '07. So same thing, really long-term Bikram teacher, blah, blah. We were chit-chatting, of course, know a lot of same people, yada, yada, yada. And so when we were in her the first time I took a class, she said, oh, and because there's a fellow Bikram teacher in the room, mama give me money. She did the mama give me money thing. It was really kind of fun, waxing nostalgic. So anyway, so speaking of that, do we want to go to the news first, Josh?
Let's go to the news.
Let's go to the news. All right, so the news. Pretty shitty.
The news sucks.
The news sucks.
Next.
Yeah,
Next.
well, I mean, and what's in the news? Actually, Josh and I and Maria were supposed to be in California today at the Yoga Expo in Pasadena, California, at the Pasadena Convention Center, which is now the ground zero for displaced people fleeing the fires in Southern California. So we send lots of love out to our friends and colleagues out in being affected by the fires. And just we were talking about before we got online or before we went live, is the big announcement with Facebook. Because now, we've shifted back to Facebook, and I made the comment, well, now all the guardrails are off, right? No
Mm.
more fact checking, all of that stuff, regardless of where you fall on the political spectrum. It's just an interesting phenomenon. And then Josh brought up the fact that trust in media sources or media outlets is at an all-time low.
All time low.
All-time low. What did you say about Al Jazeera? It's off
Even
like
like Al Jazeera, like these outlets
fundamental.
that have, yeah, they've actually traditionally held more trust longer. Even they're down, I read a thing, 20-30% in rating. Like just like people just don't. And
Trust
look,
the
yeah, they don't trust the news. I get it. I've actually been on the receiving side and the backside behind the scenes of a few different like news shows and stuff like that throughout the years. I remember when all of the allegations and controversy around Bikram were coming out in a big way. I was behind the scenes with a couple of people that were being interviewed. And I actually got brought in one case with one person for the 50 for 50 podcast as an example, um, as like moral support, basically. They're like, they knew going into it, it was going to be a difficult conversation and etc. So it's been interesting to experience that. And the point would be almost no news stories are objective news and haven't been forever. They are a narrative that's been created for ratings, and then they manipulate the conversation to support that narrative. But the thing that really irks me actually is they edit things to create that narrative.
Oh yeah,
So,
100%. They take things out of
and
context all the time.
right, and this is not new information. Like everyone knows that this is what's going on, but that would be the point. Is like, especially in the younger age bracket, people just like you can't trust anything you fucking see, and it's so politicalized, etc. So, Meta being like, fuck it, we're going the direction of X, Twitter, and are get rid of like the fact checkers in the way that we have now, and letting people just talk. Like that's what social media is supposed to be. I'm not saying that that's good or that I think that it's. I don't even know what I think, but it's interesting that this is like a backlash that's happening. I probably lean a little more libertarian in the ideology of news, where it's like we need to bring back not news and good news, because that's always going to be fuckety. Since the dawn of time, whoever is telling the news has
Controls
the
the narrative.
proclivity to control a
Yeah.
narrative. It's the same thing with history. Like history is written by the victor. Who the fuck knows what actually went on? So to me, it's more of a societal level question. We got to bring back critical thinking. Like that's actually what, yeah, I think the bigger conversation.
Yeah. Interesting. I actually subscribe, found this through an ad popped up. I subscribed to this newsletter called Tangle, and it's started by a young guy. Well, young, anybody today for me is young, who was just sort of fed up with mainstream. And what they do, there is a paid version right now. I'm just doing the free version, and essentially what they do, which I really like, is I think it is good to understand, obviously I have my political beliefs, my ideology, and I tend to read news that satisfies that. And at the same time, it's good to know what other people think and what's being said on the opposite side. But yet I don't want to go down some of those rabbit holes with some of those outlets because I don't want to get sucked in and be on, you know,
Mm,
all that kind of stuff. Like have cookies following me everywhere because I clicked on this thing. And so what this newsletter does is they take the right, they take the left, they present the arguments on both sides. And then what this young man or this person does says that he said, this is my opinion, 100%. Then he presents sort of like to still sort of like more like towards the middle. And I really
mm,
like that because, and they dive deep into like one issue, like this meta thing, right? I'm sure he's going to do one on the meta thing, right? It's like they take one topic and they give you what is the left saying on it, they give you what the right saying on it, and then it's like, let's put this all together, what's really going on here. And I really kind of like that. And what we were talking about before is why couldn't you, as a yoga studio, be a source of information for your community?
Carol, it'd be good to have you pipe in on this, but there's a marketing ideology
Mhm.
in business, and it's very simple: be the news. Now, maybe not the news in the sense of what we're talking about, like report on what's locally happening or whatever necessarily, but be the authoritative source on information that's within the context of your expertise and what your business should be known for. The be the news by extension is also whatever is the news conversation, how do you relate it to what you do? Not all of it, but be part of the larger conversation that's happening in your community from your unique angle and style.
Well, I'm thinking what's coming up for me is like this is making yoga studios even more critical for society because it allows for introspection and openness and willingness to change your mind about something. So I think that's really important to it kind of ties back into why is your yoga important right now? Why is your studio important? Because people are just getting fed what they want to see and what they want to hear. And if we're going to move forward and stop being so separate, like I think we do need to have more yoga, more openness. I don't know. This is coming up for me
Yeah,
um, when I hear this. So, uh,
I like that. I think here, as you were saying that, Carol, what was coming up for me was it's the yoga practice is really about the individual. So the studio can be the news, be the source of information in the sense that you can create conversation of introspection, like you're saying. It's about awareness. You don't necessarily have to say something that's so opinionated or your personal even belief system on things, but rather talk about relevant conversations and propose the questions so that people have their own discourse with themselves. Like that's where a studio, I think, yeah, can potentially serve a really positive thing. Let me be clear. I'm not saying like talk about politics because that's the
Right.
news everyone's talking about necessarily. But during the end of the last election cycle in the United States, for example, to say that that wasn't a conversation that was going on also isn't exactly true. So that is an extreme example. Like maybe that would have been a conversation about acceptance of reality. What can you control? What does yoga teach us about worrying about your own self, and then also standing grounded in your belief system and standing up for what's right? And you could have a whole conversation on, is a little bit disrelated, but like the other day I got a massage from a therapist in town here, and we were talking about ahimsa. And there's an infamous, maybe not famous, but infamous Dalai Lama quote where he says ahimsa is not non-harming only in the sense that you try to not cause harm, because also that's impossible in life. It's also that you can't stand idly by when deliberate harm is being done.
Hmm.
So, and like, there's more to it than that, but like, that's a really interesting thought in conversation, you know?
There's the famous quote from the British politician back, whenever it was. It's like the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is when good men do nothing.
Right.
It's loosely true, but basically it's like evil triumphs when people, and that's the same thing you just said, when people don't stand up and say this is wrong, but also standing up and saying this is wrong. And this is again where it can come in with the principles of yoga, is saying this is wrong in a way that is not going to create violence, is not going to create division or diversion, divisiveness within the community. It's like standing for something purely on the aspect of this is wrong for everybody, right? And
Right.
not, and so that I think is the subtle difference. It's not, you know, again, just to use the example of January 6th, 2021, as opposed to what happened this time, which was the peaceful transfer of power, right? So it's like that was wrong the way it's
Mhm.
supposed to be. So I don't know. I don't think I'm making sense. I've just gone on a
No,
tangent.
no, I follow you.
Okay.
I think though it might not mean from like a marketing business sense. Because look, you guys, we say this all the time. Business leadership is the most important leadership of our time. You have to lead through example. And a yoga studio, it's like, what are your principles as a person, as a studio, and then also as a yogi? What is that? Can you relate the conversation that's happening to yoga principles to have more conversation as opposed to imposing something on people? That's how you actually have a truly inclusive environment. Like controversial take that I've talked about for years is at the height of the Black Lives Matter moment, studios really took very strong, very extreme stances and made very wide spanning statements. And for many of them, it came back on them in a negative way, not a positive way. It's not that their intentions were off or that they were wrong or whatever. I would not say that for a second, but they ostracized people in their community. So, yeah, I don't know. It's interesting versus creating a space of safety and inclusivity and open conversation and acceptance of everyone. Yeah. And just facilitating like a conversation about yoga.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, yoga classes everywhere have teachers spouting off some floofy shit about chakra, blah, 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 blah,
Right.
meditative. I'm making fun of it because we're in the industry, but like, I took a class here just the other day, and it's like halfway through the class, we're talking about telling some story about a farmer with a goat that's some weird Taoist analogy that didn't make sense. And just when you align with whatever, then you'll find that the universe provides the energetic place for you to ground yourself to fly over the top of your building with your finger up your nose. Like, we're in the middle of a yoga pose. I'm like, what the fuck are we talking about? And I don't know what to do in the posture. That sort
Lock
of
your
stuff. I
fucking
mean,
knee.
yeah, that sort of stuff. It I wouldn't make fun of that individual, but I'm just like, what are we doing? But then we're not having a conversation about like just real base yoga principles.
Yeah.
Step one, asana, move your body, learn how to use your body, proper
Learn how,
alignment,
learn how
right?
to breathe.
Become aware of it. Step two, pranayam, breathe. Here's the five core breaths, like None of that's there, but we're talking about this other shit. Anyways, whatever. I digress. Be the news. It's an interesting way. This falls into in marketing, be different early and often.
Yeah.
It doesn't, by extension, that thought in marketing is like controversy creates attention, and attention is what you want. But you can get attention through non-negative controversy. And I think that's where the news has
Well, yeah,
lost the
because
plot, right? They're
certainly in this
only looking
country,
for negative
a
controversy.
controversy, yeah, that's what, yeah, let's not go down that rabbit hole, but that's what this whole country, the US is all about right now, is there is no, it is all about controversy. It is all about creating the attention that way. And so, yeah, that could be where Be the News is. Yoga studios could help flip that to be controversial, but how can we be controversial without being negative? How can we as a community put things out there in the world, the butterfly effect, the pebble in the pond, that we start the movement going back towards more centric thinking instead of
Mm.
everything has to be far right, far left. And it is true. And I actually heard this on um not a podcast, an interview. Is and I've said this a lot. I've said that is that the division is not linear. It's not a straight line. It's a circle. And the far right and the far left are really not that far apart
Yeah.
because
The
extremisms
extremisms are,
are
yeah,
it's either way. It could be either or, right?
yeah.
It's one step to the right, one step to the left. You could be totally flip. So it's like, how
Well,
do we get back to this? How do we get back to the center is really more the answer, And
the
if it's a
analogy,
circle, is there the circle in the middle, not on the outer edge?
yeah. The analogy that I heard one time somewhere was if something is acidic, it burns your skin if it falls on you, if it's extremely acidic. If something is extremely basic, it burns your skin if it falls on you. It's the balanced pH in the middle that makes that makes something
Right.
quote safe, you know. So, anyways,
There we go.
I
How do
think
we restore the pH balance?
well, maybe I think the controversial take that you can have in being the news and having a conversation and expanding your, attention reach as a yoga studio, practically the controversy, or any boutique fitness, wellness, therapist office would be a good example. Like, I can't believe how much they don't participate in conversations and people want them to. It's it's by creating more critical thinking. It's like having the tough love or the tough truth conversation, not in an imposing way, but in a thought-provoking way. Imagine if we're talking, instead of about the details of the news, we're talking about the details of how you can allow the news to control your brain and make you feel a certain way, but truthfully, you're the only one who can control how you feel. And how do you do that? That's the actual conversation. Someone comes in and they're like, oh, fuck Trump or fuck Kamala or whatever it is, or I don't like that doesn't have fact checking. Now it's going to be rampant shit all over the place.
How
Versus,
do
I
you,
think it's great, super libertarian, free speech. That's not the conversation. The conversation is you're going to be okay either way. But here's how: do some yoga practice.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
how could just from a practical application, if someone's out there in, YC land listening, how could they actually translate this into to Be the News? What would be some ways that people could do that? I mean, simply, like you said, is thinking about what came to mind when you were talking, Josh, is just your content on your social media could be
Yeah.
about that type. That would be to me and then like rather than just it seems to be newsletter time. I'm getting all the newsletters again, and it's like a laundry list of upcoming workshops, a laundry list of this and that. And oh, by the way, why do people still send emails about class closures? Just have it in your, you change your software and people check. Anyway, it just drives me crazy. But make those newsletters beyond just, we've got this workshop coming up.
Mm.
maybe start.
Right. Or yeah,
Yeah.
turn it into news. Or if you're going to send me something about a workshop coming up, create a news story about it.
Ah,
Like make it a news story. Think of it that way. Don't just say like, oh, there's this workshop and it's cool because we're gonna workshop some stuff. Sign up for $50. Link. Like, what's the story? Who's teaching it? Why should I listen to them? What do I get afterwards? What's the story about someone who's done something similar before? How is it going to teach me something that you've yourself learned? Like,
I like that. Make a new. Well, I don't know. Did you see my post on? I posted yesterday about. I know you. I saw you did it, Carol. I saw you check that you. The client had a beginning series workshop that started this week, and right before Christmas, they'd been advertising website, da da da, and they had nobody signed up for it. And I looked at it and I went, that's why it's pretty damn boring. So I
mm,
took it. The gist of the article is this is how you can use Chat GPT. So I took it and then said, before you answer, this is what we're doing. I copy and pasted in what they had on the website for the description, all the details and stuff. And I said, make this more hero's journey, you focus, what some problem solution, all that stuff. And then I said, and then ask me 5 questions for, like we've talked about. So then I got the 5 questions, sent it to the owner and said, have the teacher who's doing it answer these questions, which he did. So then I put the questions back in, spit out the new description, tweaked a little bit, put it up. They sold the workshop up, sold it out over Christmas holidays.
nice.
Right. And it was because, like you said, they made it was more interesting, it was more engaging. What are we going to get out of it? And so I think that's what you just hit it on is make it about it, make it a news story. I love that.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, there's the news stories. If you think about literally the nightly news, there's the stories that are the one-off thing. They're like filler. They're
Mhm.
filler and they're interesting, and you're like, oh, that's cool, but it's fleeting. You like get the little dopamine hit from consuming the headline and have your opinion on it, and then it's gone, and tomorrow you never think about it again. And then there's the ongoing news stories that you become invested in, and it's like this whole bigger narrative in your head's going on. Like this Mangione stuff, like it's gonna go on for fucking months. It's gonna be studied in law schools. Like that's news. So make your workshop, don't make it Mangione, but like bring that vibe of attention to it by having a more whole conversation around it.
I'm also thinking about this is really specific to like what's going on here in St. Louis. We've been snowed in for about 3 days. And so there's basically a pub, and they sent into the local TV stations like they're opening at 4. So you see all these, this is closed, this is closed, this is closed, and this pub is opening up at 4 p.m. Opens at 4 p.m. So like if you're a yoga studio, just something, it's a little bit like a roundabout in what we're talking about, but like yeah, you're
Yeah,
on the news now. Like we're opening for 5 o'clock classes, so just don't
yeah,
be afraid to kind of go out there, and you don't need to announce your closure necessarily, but maybe announce that you're open and then you get some free advertising
yeah.
from
We did an open house. We did an open house one year, and there was a cold snap after a snowstorm, which is rare because usually if it snows, it's actually warmer. It was
Yeah.
like 3 feet of snow the day before, and then minus 25. And people were phoning. They're like, "Is it still on?" Like the whole town fucking shut down, and we're like, "We're yogis, dude. Like we're open. If you got snowshoes, just come." So we were the only thing happening. A radio station came to the studio for free and was advertising us. There's nothing else going on. But to Carol's point, like we just put it out there. Like we didn't say anything special. Like, yep, we're open.
Yeah.
Also, we're a hot yoga studio. So
Well,
come on
hey,
in.
that just made me think of what about to, like you said, be the news and write your workshops and stuff like news. What if have we forgotten, like anybody ever send old fashioned press releases anymore?
Yeah, it's something people should do.
Yeah,
Studios do
like
it. Studios do it, but it's not it's actually on the or was on the original marketing checklist that we have in the YC. Like press release because especially smaller local towns. You'd be surprised how much press you can get, especially if you start a relationship with the people who control that stuff.
Yeah, and also with I think with the smaller, I think every community has like the local weekly newspaper that because mostly the big newspapers are all owned by pretty much a couple of companies in the United States. So like the local weekly papers, oftentimes those can be really great because oftentimes here it's like the Oakwood Register. Everybody reads the Oakwood Register, right? So if you want to advertise, that's what you want to put it in because that's they have the Dayton Daily News, but everybody gets and it's a free one. It's the one that people, you pick up at the coffee shop, you pick up at the restaurant, whatever. But I've just made me think it's like maybe getting back to some OG guerrilla marketing, just like press releases, things like that, and just
Mm.
regular local news outlets. And because I've also been thinking, is it possible? I know we've talked about this before. Is in today's world, could you have a business, a yoga studio, and just not be on social media, period, end of story? Have no Insta, have nothing.
Mm.
Could that be possible? I don't know.
I want to say yes. I used to more definitively be like yes. I don't know. Before I say more, Carol, what do you think?
I think that if it was like a really high, like a smaller boutique where it was like a word of mouth thing and, there was something really special about it. I don't know.
Carol
It's
sent
just,
me.
what's that?
Carol sent me.
Exactly. Like a
Yeah,
speakeasy type of thing, or,
yeah.
you got to know somebody, you need a secret code. Like you could kind of get a lot of buzz, I think, that way. But how long lived would that
Yeah.
be? I don't know. It would be an interesting experiment,
I
possibly
mean,
expensive one.
it would be to me. It would be do you bleed out cash flow wise before you get enough traction would be the question. But it's possible for things like that to wildfire for sure. Um, I mean, that is kind of what happens. Like when a business or a place is really dope, it's word of mouth. Like living in Mexico here, it's very much like that.
Yeah.
So many businesses like they have a Facebook page. That's it. And best case scenario, they're on WhatsApp. So you like WhatsApp them to communicate or whatever. But half of them don't have anything. And it's not how people look for things. Like there's this sense of difficulty finding stuff online because of that. So then if you need a repair guy or you need whatever else, like you don't go to the internet. You WhatsApp into a WhatsApp group. You're like, hey, I need a mechanic that works on this sort of stuff. Anyone recommend someone? And people send you contacts and you just directly message people. Like everything's kind of word of mouth like that. So
Well, that's the
human
affluent
human
sport.
behavior is such that it
Yeah.
theoretically works. But I think to Carol's point, like you've got to have an angle. It would be fun to start a boutique fitness yoga studio that's like a speakeasy underground sort of thing. That would be fun. You probably need to do it. I don't know if this is totally true. You probably have to do it in a pretty big city, like so you have enough populace to draw from. That might not even be true. I don't know.
I don't necessarily, I don't know.
I bet you it exists. I bet you New York's got one.
Well, yeah, and then you can kind of go, and then it's like, well, is it exclusive? Is it for everyone kind of thing? And it's like you lean into no, it is exclusive.
Yeah.
We talked about this on a
There,
roundup a while back about making it super exclusive and you charge the heck out of it.
yeah.
Make it like
We
concierge
well,
level.
we are seeing that in places. That's actually the I would say one of the bigger financially, it's the biggest growth area in boutique fitness and wellness. But it's a big growth area just in general, even by total, where you're paying, 1 to 3 thousand a month in membership fees. That's there's a lot of money going into centers that are based off of that model.
Then you
So I
really
think
have
that
to have everything
yeah,
dialed in. It has to be such high. It's like the cost of operations for places like that's why they can charge that much because they have to. I mean, if you're going to spend that much money, you're going to expect.
Yeah, well, you're going to expect results.
Yeah.
Like those places, when you start, you're doing body samples, blood work, like they've got what's it called, a DECA machine where they're like
Yeah.
super MRI stuff or whatever, like that you are, and then you're getting hyper customized programming, etc. So yeah, I think we'll definitely see that. Um, there is a bar in Germany. I forget the name because it's probably a German name that I don't know. No, I don't know. U-Bahn in Undergenschlagen. Like I have no idea what it's called. But it's infamous because people dress in like BDSM and really intense outfits. And it's like one of these places that apparently I've never been to it. I just have friends who've been there. That there's actually people like hanging in bird cages and shit. Like the place is supposed to be wild. Not negative wild, just fucking wild. But the key to it is the bouncers, you have to go through like 3 rounds of approval at the door to even get in. There's no such thing as a reservation. There's no like you're a VIP. And the story that I heard was like all they're doing is vibe checking you. If they think you're like if you show up there and you're like a loudmouth party person or whatever else, they'd just be like, get the fuck out of here. Nope. Like you're gone. And then they take your phone at the door. They take your phone and your keys. So you can't have any social media or anything in it. Like, and that's what makes the place on an international level attractive now, is that it's like this wild place that also has this elitist feel, but not because you paid for it, but because like you've got to actually be cool.
Studio 54.
Yeah, kind of. New version of that. All right.
Wow. Okay, be the news.
And no more fact checking on Facebook. So
Say whatever you want.
say whatever you want. Make some shit. Oh my God, we're terrible. What else are we talking about? What else are we
You
talking
can
about?
just like create whatever you want now. Nobody's going to fact check you. Or the commitment.
Honestly,
Remember,
we've had ads and posts and all sorts of shit get taken down because it breaks some policy or like we've got fact check stuff. And it's like the most absurd, non like thing that gets flagged. And that it's not like you can phone someone up and fix it, you know? So from a business operations standpoint, I actually like this idea just to get rid of some of that shenanigans. But anyways,
anyways,
Carol, what else? What else we got going on?
what else? Mysterious Carol.
What else did we talk about before we got on? Can't remember.
Product.
Oh
Oh,
yeah,
products. Yeah.
that's right. It's a good time. We were talking about how it's not the best time of year to maybe like shake things up too much and make a lot of changes, but really dial in what you have going on. And how do you tighten your product? How do you make sure that the classes are consistent and they're being taught the way that you expect them to be? And there's definitely, we've talked about this before. If there's something incongruent with what the description is and when I come in to take, it's really disturbing to me as a student, you know? So we were just kind of talking about that before we got on. So how do we do that?
How do you improve product?
Yeah,
Well, I think first off, you need to have someone in charge of it.
Do you think so?
Yeah.
I
Like, I
think
mean,
you
I
need an
guess
owner that cares about it. Like there's some that I feel
right,
like don't
right.
even
Someone has to.
care.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, most industry, if you think about it, most industry have either like product development, product review, quality control, you know,
Yeah, that's true.
there's service industry should be no different. And I mean, a good example, it was just a small thing, but when I went down to the studio last weekend, um, yes, I took 4 Bikram classes. Two were 90. Well, actually, one was 90, one was 75, and two were 60. And that just sort of irritated me. It's like, either do 90 or 60. Why do three different types? It's just like, anyway. that aside, the two 60-minute classes were both different.
And they were the same labeled class?
It was a 60, they called it, was just they called it their 20s or whatever they call it, 60 minutes. And both versions were slightly different. And so
Right. If that's deliberate, that's one thing. But if it's
I
supposed to
asked,
be the same class,
I
yeah.
couldn't help myself. I could not help myself. I just said to the one teacher, I said, I'm just curious. That's what I said. I was channeling you, Josh. I'm just curious. I said, I'm curious. I took the so-and-so's class last night and then this, I said, I'm just curious, why were they so different? Are they supposed to be different? And the teacher just rolls her, said, no, they're not supposed to be different. But the person who taught it the night before decided to teach it in a different way. Right? Because there's a lot of different versions of the 60-minute out there. I don't care what version you use. It's just like, for me, it was like, if you're trying to create congruity. So that's a great example of that. It's like, so I do think you need to have someone in charge of it. And what does
Yeah,
that
I mean, there's certainly management of it. I think product, the analogy that I'm working through my brain is like is a restaurant. In a restaurant's a good testing ground where you've got everything because you have the physical environment of the restaurant all the way down to the napkin and the chair that you sit in, like changes the vibe of the place, the lighting, the sound, and what specific volume level. Like that's how intricate it can be. Then you have the product itself, the food. So then you've got food quality, ability of the chefs, speed. Does it show up warm? Is it consistent? The big one, obviously, being like, is it fucking delicious? Then there's presentation of the food itself, you know, counts for something. But then you also have all of the service staff. How are you greeted at the door? How are you seated? Like, how are tables bussed at what speed and how clean is the place? How are your servers? And so, like, there's a manager for all of these components who is optimizing all of them over time for the vision of what's going on, which is why restaurants are fucking insane as businesses. Yeah. But a yoga studio is not that different.
yeah.
You know, you've got your actual room environment, you've got the whole studio, you got your front desk staff, you've got your teacher, you've got the classes and the sequencing themselves, you've got like the bathrooms, all of that's all the cleaning team. Like that's all the product. So then the question is, are you optimizing that for a specific outcome and vision of quality? And I think that's where, Carol, your point really pipes in. Like in the yoga world, for some reason, and it's not that this is wrong, I would say, but it's that without any specific deliberate intention, there's often the case in a studio where like all the classes are just whatever the fuck the teacher feels like. So it's and then the you hide behind the guise of variety.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yes. Yes. My
Like, oh,
personal,
I want variety, but you're like, but what variety? Like,
yeah.
still, what's the actual product?
And my personal favorite, which just is like fingers on the chalkboard to me, is when the teacher says, "So what do you want to work on today?"
Right.
Meaning
Yeah,
you haven't, you don't have, you haven't prepped for class. You're just making it up as you go along. I don't know. That's just like, to me, it's just like, ugh. But
no,
yeah,
I'm with you. That's an example of a specific thing that I, as a student, experienced that and have my whole entire practice career when I just practiced all the way through being a teacher to now more seasoned, having spent lots of time in yoga classes. Like, I really don't like that because one, I don't actually feel like I can state what I would want to work on because I'm typically the like stiff, larger dude in the class. And 50% of the class are bendy women. Not in all studios all the time, but like that might be the case. And for sure, the people who actually call out are the people who are comfortable in the class and comfortable with the teacher and go every day. And they're going to fucking say hips. Like it's going to be someone will yell out hips. 180,000% of the time,
Yeah.
someone's gonna yell at hips. And like if I yelled out back bending, half the teachers would not even know how to teach the class focus on back bending.
Oh, that's a good
So
one. Yeah, yeah. Sometimes I've been tempted to say, well, does this mean you haven't prepped your class? Why are you asking us? Don't you know what you're going to teach us today?
yeah. What do you want to do today? Yoga.
Yoga.
I'm here to
I thought,
follow you. If
yeah,
I was making the class up, I'd stay at home.
yeah.
God, we're just shit on them. Poor teachers, we just give them so much flack. But from a product centric viewpoint, it's not about making things monotonous or boring or vanilla, but rather just having defined product to solve a specific outcome. Look, I would take it a step further, and you guys know you're saying this off camera too. I don't like surveys in yoga studios. I
Yeah.
think that they have historically given the wrong impression of things, and people lie on surveys and forums all the time, not on purpose. It's like just a human trait thing, but there is a place for them. At
Just
some
never ask
point,
what class time. You'll never get consensus on class time.
right. Yeah. Yeah. You have to really be clear on what you're trying to accomplish with your surveys. And it's how you run them. Like really interview style for deeper questions makes more sense. The point though being is product is one of them where you can get some really valuable insights after you've been going for a while. If you're in your first 3 years, don't run a survey on what classes people like. Just get your shit together and make your classes really awesome based off your opinion. You need to have been going for a while and have some solid teachers in there and whatever else. But it would be interesting, like if you polled, you need a good sample. You polled, 50 to 100 people and then deep interviewed 10 as well. But you have to be specific on what your questions like. What do they want out of the class? Why are they coming? What's the result? What do they feel is good? Or what's something they feel like it misses? Like you've got to get in and then interpret that. That could be interesting. I think you would learn a lot. Carol.
I want to circle back to something you just said, Josh, because I think the way you said it to me came across weird. Like, no. So ideally, because you said, first 1 to 3 years, you're just trying to figure out, don't ask about product. I would say you should have your product defined on day one.
Oh, I
Right.
mean, don't survey so that you're changing your core
Okay.
product.
Okay.
Your first 3 years, you're just figuring out how to deliver your core product in a
Okay.
powerful way.
Because the
So if
way you
you,
said it, it was like, oh,
yeah,
you make it. No, it's like you want to know what type of studio you're going to
yeah,
be from when you open your doors. I just wanted to
absolutely.
clarify.
I
Okay.
100% agree. 100% agree.
Okay.
And to be clear, I'm not suggesting at any point if you're like, we're a power vinyasa flow studio and you do a survey and you're like, tricked you, now we're yin. Like, that's not what I'm suggesting either. I'm saying, how do you optimize your existing product? My
Okay.
point was in your first 3 years, if you ask your student base that's still relatively small and you're trying to optimize product, like it's in 3 years is an arbitrary number. Maybe it's possible it happens faster than this, but like you're just figuring out how to deliver your core product in your style and way and have your whole team moving the same direction with it. So don't fuck with it too much at that point. There's the optimization or the basics. You don't need to be optimizing based off of surveying would be my thought.
I think the time frame is, I think, a lot dependent upon how many classes a week you have on your schedule, right? If you're a smaller studio and you only have let's say less than 20 classes a week, it's going to take a little bit longer than a bigger studio, bigger market that might have 25, 30 classes a week. But I also just circle back to what you hit on is you do need to have the product defined when you open, because a lot of times I see where particularly newer studios struggle is they don't. It's just like, oh, I've hired these yoga teachers and they're teaching yoga classes. And it's like there's no rhyme or reason to what they're teaching. And
Yeah.
I think that's often when working with some newer clients or like in their first year or so is where they're really struggling
Mm.
because they didn't start off the gate saying like we're a power yoga studio, or like to one of Carol's clients, Susan Smedley, Resilient Soul Yoga out in Colorado. I was out there last year And she absolutely said, going into it, she knew that she was going to be more of restorative yoga. She said, there's plenty of power places in my community. And it's great because when you walk, I've said this before, you walk into her studio, you're like, it is like a sanctuary, right? It
Mm.
is the polar opposite to walking into my old hot yoga studio, right? Totally different feel because she knew exactly what she wanted to create. So I think that's oftentimes what it's kind of a little tangent here, but just based on what I've seen, and Josh, I know you've been doing this heck a lot longer than I have, but even Carol too, it's like I often think studios that really struggle to get things going are because they don't have that clear vision when they open. They just say, oh, I've hired some yoga teachers, I'm going to teach some yoga classes. To me, that's sort of like, you're going out of business and you barely got off the ground.
Mm.
I don't know. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I think the precursor to being able to optimize and improve your product is having product definition in the first place.
Start.
What are you optimizing for? Like if you're like, oh, just teach whatever you want. Okay, but like and actually there is maybe a place for a studio that's like that, but at least have that defined. Like I want no two classes to be the same at all. 100% based off the teacher's style or whatever else. Like it just own that that's what you're doing. If that's how you want to roll, that's fine. But then you have to be prepared for everything that comes with that too, you know. I think if you surveyed, Carol, jump in here. I
Yeah.
think if you surveyed and got a feel for what, because let me be clear, it's not just what people like. That does matter. It's why do people like something and what do they want? That's what you're trying to survey for, and that's what you could theoretically optimize for.
And also, what do they need? You might not always get what you want. You might
It's
not
what you
get
need.
is what you need.
Eh.
Yeah. So it's like that.
Yeah.
That is a subtle distinction. Is but between the want and the need, it's may they say they might want this, but the reality is that's not what they want. This is what they need. Oh,
Mm.
interesting, right?
Okay. Okay. Yes, totally agree. And practically speaking, I think what I've experienced in the yoga world is a lot of like gritty mentality, like, oh, I don't care, they want to like this is what they need. But that only works if you actually help them achieve the result
Right.
that they also want. Right? So it's like both have to be true. The want part is like I want to do this yoga posture or not? Maybe not, but that's not even the conversation.
Right.
But
It's just
what I want is results. I want to
yeah.
feel like this. I want this to happen. I want to
I
whatever.
need this to happen. I need to lower my blood pressure. I need to get more flexible. I need, whatever that is. Interesting. I have a newer client who I had not heard of this before. Is when she has a new teacher, like audition a new teacher, and they do like a community class come in, they solicit feedback. They open it up to not just yoga teachers, but people in their community can come in. Their members and stuff can take this potential teacher's class. They solicit feedback from the clients, from the students. How did they like this person in class? And I thought, whoa, that's interesting.
Yeah, I've seen that too. Carol, what do
I
you
don't
think
know.
on like
I
what's
don't
your
know how I
thoughts on
feel
that?
about it. Yeah.
For me, I think we've talked about this before where I think we were talking about on Spill the Booch, but like how a teacher's class might be so wild and out there for one student and they hate it. And then another person can be like, that was my favorite class ever. So I don't really, for me, that would not, I wouldn't want the students' feedback. I would just want to take it myself and identify whether it was something that I felt matched, the studio's vibe, going back to the needs and the wants of the studio. So yeah, that's an interesting take, and maybe
Mm.
I'm interested to know if they've made decisions based on what the students' feedback is
Oh,
versus what they really, feel or know in their heart whenever they take class. Because I
yeah.
feel like I can take a class and be like, yeah, or I can be like, hell no, like
Oh
this
my.
is not going in my studio.
Yeah.
So,
Well, they say that for actually, they said like top HR people and people that HR professionals that interview and like basically it's like, typically within the first 3 to 5 minutes whether you're going to hire this person or not. And the rest of the interview is either A, validating what you felt, or B, coming up with such a compelling reason to overturn your initial. So it really is, they say, the first impressions, and it's true. And I think the same thing is, I don't know, I can go into a yoga and I can tell within the first little bit whether or not I'm like, "Ugh, this is going to be a slog just to make it through," or man, this is going to be a great class. So interesting.
yeah.
I think the other detail that mixes into this is then you have to have something that you can objectively measure, turn
Well,
it
yeah.
something quantitative, right? So I always think, and I've told the story before, we had a teacher, they were new and they were frustrating to mentor because they didn't take feedback very well. They were very positive. They received the feedback in real time without any pushback, like nothing, there's no personality problem. But then you'd go take their next class and there seemed to be zero attempt to integrate any of the feedback. And this went on for a long time. And they had the highest retention rate of new students, like 2 quarters in a row. And I was just like, I don't know. Like, clearly I'm wrong because people fucking come back to this class. And my interpretation of it, and I experienced this in a few studios throughout the years too, they served a specific purpose in the larger group of teachers for our students because their class was very consistent, not that hard. Like you knew exactly what you were going to get as a product taking this person's class versus if you took my class, it was going to be completely different based off of what was happening in the room that day. So I don't know. It's not. It wouldn't necessarily have been that they were like, "That's my favorite teacher," but the consistency and the sort of knowing what it was made it an easy class to just say yes to and to end up coming back to. So from a retention standpoint, if we didn't measure that, I would have thought this is our weakest teacher. But the classes were full and people came back. So I was wrong on that front. So you have to like balance it out with measure. The student thing, the time that I saw it happen, I've seen it a few times when we were traveling, but the time that I saw it happen where it seemed really wonky was there was this studio that they would send a feedback out immediately after like the first or second class. So every new student came in, they'd be like, they had angled it as give us feedback on the teacher, not your experience, not what you liked, not whatever else. How did your teacher do? Do you like the teacher? What did you like about them? Like getting feedback on the teacher themselves as opposed to anything else. And they would get the most wild responses because of wording it that way. You'd get people, oh well, I felt this part of the class was a little slow, or like I didn't like that they said this, or like we're talking about someone who's never been to the studio and has taken one class from one teacher and they're giving feedback like that. So then the question became like, well, what do you do with this feedback?
Yeah.
You know, and they were giving it to their teachers, and all that happened is that they just created dissent amongst the ranks.
Yeah.
Fast forward a couple more years, that studio unfortunately lost their shirt and closed, and I feel bad for them. But it wasn't because of this one event only, but like that angle of mentality, it was like it didn't solve something in a powerful way for them. I don't feel like it improved their product. It actually diminished it.
So circling back to how do you do this in your studio? And I think it's like before we came on, Josh was like, well, is there anything new? And I think I don't know if it's necessarily new. It's going back to basics, is like having someone in charge of it and that it's tracked and the feedback is given and there's a mechanism for it, and sharing numbers more and more in coaching clients to share numbers with their teachers. Let them know what their retention rate is, what the first visit return rate is. And this is a good one. How many new members we got and how many members we lost.
Mm. Yeah.
because some months, as you know, you lose more members than you get. And as we know, teachers are directly responsible for the retention. It's like, because the product is the class, they're teaching the class. Therefore, if they're not retaining people, that's something the teacher is absolutely responsible for. So that can be a real gut punch when it's like, yeah, we got a bunch of new clients last month, new members, yahoo. But guess what? We lost more. So we're down 5 or 6 members. What?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think those are the type of things, and I know I've been harping on it forever and a day, is your teachers should be held accountable as professionals. Whether they teach one class a week, whether it's a side hustle, whether they have a real job, all of those things. First, I think it goes back to even before, is like, in your head as the owner, you have to believe that this is their job, this is their profession, and that you need to hold them accountable. And I'll get down off my soapbox again.
Yeah, I mean, if it's serious for you, you have to make it serious for them. It doesn't have to be like a heavy weight. It's just like
No,
the excuse of letting off the hook, like, oh, it's a side hustle. They only teach once a week, so like I'm not going to give them any feedback on stuff. That doesn't make sense. That's like saying, well, my product is not that great, but it's only once a week that it's delivered shitty. Like, I don't care. Oh, when this cooks in the kitchen, they fuck up the eggs every time, but they only cook once a week. No big
no
deal.
big deal. Yeah,
Said no restaurateur that made any money ever.
ever.
Like, no, it's not a thing. I I'd be curious what you think about this, Carol, too, because here's the new conversation ish around this. The feedback part, figuring out what people need, what they want, but then being willing to actually, and this is a bit of a double-edged sword, willing to actually change things.
Mm-hmm.
Like a lot of yoga for years, and there's reasons for it, and there's a value point. So I'm saying this is a double-edged sword, was super fucking rigid. You do it like this way, and there's no questions about it whatsoever. That's beneficial when you're teaching disciplined yoga practice, and that's the entire embodiment of the studio. And that became sort of an excuse to be unmoving in adjusting things. The example, a really simple example is there's a few studios and there's a couple of brands that I've coached throughout the years where they're like, well, yoga's not supposed to have music in the class, but they're not like a traditional style or something, which is I agree, that's not traditionally like the way a lot of asana was taught, but they were just very rigid about this, despite the fact that they had a couple of classes that had music and everyone wanted the music. They were getting positive feedback on the music and like nothing else. And it's not like they weren't embodying the fact that there's no music in class because of this reason and then occupying people's minds through different methodology. Like it wasn't a disciplined thing that was being taught as to why. And it took 10 years. And then finally now there's one brand and a couple studios that we know have music in their classes. And guess what? Those classes are full. So love or don't like the music or not, like what do you want?
It's
People
yeah,
practicing
it's
yoga or not?
what's reminding me of is when we started adding the 60-minute, 26 and 2 classes. And I had a woman come to me and she's like, I am very disappointed that these classes are changing. We didn't change them all, but we had a very significant number that we changed. And I said, I'm disappointed as well, but this is what the numbers are telling me. you know and I was flat out with her, like, the numbers are telling me this is what we need to do, and that seems to be the way of the studio. And I stood firm in it, and you know what, she's still a student today. So she adjusted and made her way. But yeah, I think you do have to be willing to listen, learn, and be willing to change when you need to. Thinking back to, you were talking about, Terry, practical ways to implement. And Josh, you reminded me of a conversation that I had a long time ago with a teacher where it's like we're doing Bikram yoga. It's very obvious, like, this is the order, this, right? And she was wanting to do all these extra things. And I was like, look, your plate of food, it was a restaurant. I was like, we are serving the same plate of food every single time. I'll let you put a little more salt, pepper, whatever, paprika, something else on it that you want to do, but this is the plate. This is meal that we are serving every time you teach. So
Yeah.
I want you to have your personality, but you can't add something else to the plate. You can't take away anything from the plate. And so that's sort of how I totally, triggered that in my memory. So I think that's kind of a practical way, even with like a vinyasa class, it seems like you could have this is the plate, here are the extra items that you could or could not add, but define it. And I think that, that just again goes to better product and the expectation that comes from the students when you have it
Yeah.
defined.
There's a burger cart in town here. It's called Baby's Burgers, and everyone would call them the best burgers in town. It's small, and but whatever. The point is, they only serve burgers. That's it. And you can get one patty, two or three, and you can say yes or no to cheese. That's it.
Love
Those are
it.
the options. There's
Love
nothing
it.
else you can do. If you don't want a burger that's like that, you just don't fucking go there. It would be like hiring a cook that they're like, you know what? Today we're making zucchini. Like, that doesn't make any sense. So it doesn't have to be that extreme where your classes have to be like, this is the only one thing we do, but just some level of definition and consistency in the product. And then what measure it? What's actually happening? What do the people want? Like, are you actually getting the results as a business? Are you actually getting your students the results that they want?
And I do want to say something about music. And I think that's something that can enhance or detract. Because I think when you have music in class, it should be intentional.
Sure.
We were at an on-site last year and it was a vinyasa class and the instructor was playing music and there was no rhyme or reason to the music at all. And it really was jarring just even listening to it
Mm.
in terms of we weren't taking the class, but we could hear it. And it was like absolutely zero rhyme or reason to the music. It's just like throw together a play. So I think and then I took a class at another studio last year at an on-site. It was one of the best classes I took with the use of music, other than like an IHP class, like a yoga class, right? The way that the teacher timed the music it was very intentional. And that actually enhanced the class. As to this
Yeah.
other class, the music was a huge detractor. And so these are the type of things that's part of the product,
Yeah.
right? So those are all those things that need to be monitored and tracked and feedback provided to keep the product fresh and keep the product what people want. So I just wanted to throw that out there with regards to music. So
Well, I
um,
think it's not just music. That's any part of product development as well, staying on subject matter. It's intention.
yeah,
What is the intention? Doing it with intention. I'm teaching the class this way with this formula, with or without music in this way, et cetera, et cetera. Because why? Like I have this specific intention in doing it. That's, I think, the thing that gets missed is when things have no intention, and then it's not necessarily that they're negative, but then it's like, what's your brand and how do you measure if you're succeeding or not? And it's precarious. So,
yeah,
all right,
here we have it.
there we have it. Go yell at your teachers. No.
Well, it's a good time
Go
of year.
hype. No, go hype your teachers up. I
Hype
think
them
the
up.
only thing we didn't talk about is it to improve product, improve the mental state and whatever of your team. If
Practice.
people are pumped, they're pumped coming in and they feel like they're a rock star and you're hyping them on that, they deliver better too.
Yeah.
So,
And take each other's classes. I think that's the best way to keep your product fresh.
yep, true.
We've talked about that too. Okay.
All right,
Uh, yeah,
that's it. Have a
that's
good
it.
weekend.
Yeah.
See
Have
you
a
guys
good
soon.
weekend. Post any comments below.